Today, I want to talk through your options for creating your first information product, your first offering to your audience. You've been creating content, you're building an audience, hopefully you're building an email list, and now you're thinking, what do I sell to them? There are things like affiliate marketing, there's lots of options out there, but for me personally, selling an information product that I've created, that I sell directly to my audience, has been the overwhelming majority of my income from my online business. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, I would love to hear from you. Have you created your own offering yet? Have you sold anything to your audience? If so, leave a comment, let me know yes or no, and how did it go? And if not, what are you thinking about right now as far as what your first offering is going to be? Let's talk about that. So I've been running my business, Home Studio Corner, for the last 15 years, and it has become a six-figure business that generates consistent revenue for me year in and year out. And the predominant, I'd say 90% of my revenue comes through selling products and memberships. So that's the first question you're going to have to figure out for yourself. Am I going to sell a course or am I going to sell a membership? By the way, I tend to use the word course and product interchangeably. They're technically both products. So technically, courses versus memberships, that's the question here. Now, let's talk about memberships, because memberships is probably it's the most attractive of the two, because really anywhere you look, the term passive income is really overused. Passive. It's not passive. It takes a lot of work to sell and then to continue and to maintain. But the idea of someone joining you, but then paying every month or every year to continue to be a part of your system, it is attractive. It is absolutely attractive. It is an important piece to my business because that recurring revenue creates a baseline income that comes in every month without me having to actively promote something. Okay, so I can sell the current way I'm doing it. I open and close my membership twice a year. So we had a big launch in December. And so now I know that I've got several $1,000s that are going to hit my account every month without me doing anything. That's nice to have because business tends to be up and down, right? Ideally, you're good at creating systems that consistently bring in sales and revenue. And one of the systems that can do that really well is some sort of recurring membership. So from a business standpoint, from a somewhat selfish standpoint, you and I, as the business owners, can really wrap our heads around how nice it would be to have recurring revenue. From the customer standpoint, it's a harder sell. And just think about yourself. There are things that you pay for every month, from utility bills to things like probably Netflix, whatever you use to listen to your music. There are recurring bills that we have, but there's a limit. Anytime we want to buy something that we don't think of in terms of, it makes sense for me to pay for my water bill every month because I use water every month. I watch the streaming services and listen to music every month. So those things make sense. But if it's an educational product, right? That's going to teach me how to do something. Even if I'm chomping at the bit, so ready to jump in, I'm probably more ready to jump into a single payment than I am to some sort of being on the hook for paying for something every month. It's just human nature. There's a little bit of pause that says, oh, I'm committing to paying every month. It's a little bit like going into debt, even though it's not. I'm saying, would I rather pay cash for my car and then have, next month there is no money going towards car, or would I rather buy it on a loan and then pay several $100s every month towards the car? I would rather, ideally, even though there's financial reasons to get a loan. I'm not sure. I don't like car payments, but I would much rather just pay for it up front and then not have that bill. So then I have this kind of clean slate every month, and I'm not starting with all these recurring bills adding up. So we all have recurring bills that we love and recurring bills that we don't. And if you're offering another recurring bill, it's especially today, even today more so than 10 years ago, people have probably more subscriptions than they've ever had, right? Even thinking about TV, like for 10 years ago, Netflix was really the only one. And now they're, each of the different movie studios, each of the different stations, the networks have all made their own subscription services. So it's probably, if you're anything like me, I subscribe to a handful of different platforms to get access to the different TV shows and movies that I want to have access to. So if you come in offering me a membership to learn about your niche, let's say it's how to make great baked goods, then I'm going to be a little less hesitant to join your membership because it's that recurring monthly thing. Even if it's an annual thing, I'm going to be a little less hesitant because I got to pay every month. So now I've got the job of justifying that monthly bill every month, right? Am I still using this? Is this still valuable to me? There's a lot more to it. So it's a bit of a hard sell for the customer. Doesn't mean it's not worth doing. I think memberships are a fantastic piece of an overall online business model. But you have to remember, just because you can think about it from your perspective and say, ooh, monthly membership, come join my thing for $100 a month. Come on in, everybody. I just need to get, 83 people and I'm making six figures and I can do that. But you got to remember, to join a $100 a month membership, that's a big chunk for people, especially if you're like I am. You're in a hobbyist niche for the most part. People are doing this. They're making, I'm in the music niche, so music production. People are typically not doing this full time. It's their side gig. It's their hobby. They're a weekend warrior. So they're not making money from this. So it's even harder to say, come pay me lots and lots of money every month, and I'll help you do this thing really well. The other piece to selling an ongoing membership is there's no definitive start and end. So back to our baking analogy. If you were going to teach me how to make the ultimate apple pie, you could sell me a course that goes start to finish, everything from sourcing the apples, planting my own orchard, all the way to the final slice and serving it on a plate with ice cream just so and caramel on top, whatever. Now I'm hungry. Thanks a lot. You could do that, and I would probably, if I really want to make the best apple pie, I would probably buy that course. If you give me a membership on just how to make pies, or maybe bigger, how to just be a better baker, how to get good at baking all kinds of things, I might still be interested in that, because if I'm interested in apple pie, I'm probably interested in all the other pies and all the other types of baked things, but it's going to be harder to get me in because I may just want to do the apple pie thing, and I don't know what you're going to cover every month, and you can't tell me what you're going to cover every month because it changes every month depending on when I join. So I'm going to join in the middle of, maybe it's blueberry month, and I join, and if I'm allergic to blueberries, I'm going to be feeling like I made the wrong decision. Or if you get into, a 3-month cycle where you're talking all about strudel, and I hate strudel, I'm not even sure what strudel is, then I'm going to feel a lot like there's a lot less value there. So you're always having to justify your existence to your members, not in a weird grovelly way, but just if you start to phone things in and do things that are just kind of okay valuable, but not really what's most valuable for the majority of your audience, you'll see those numbers, you'll get members and you'll see it trickle off and you'll see it go down, and you'll have to continually be adding more value, which is good. It should be that way. They shouldn't just join and then never cancel. If it's not valuable for them, they should cancel. Sadly, that's true. So you have to think through all of this when you're considering creating a membership. But the bigger piece of this puzzle, yes, I think a membership, some sort of recurring thing, is absolutely a great idea for your business model, but just later. If you've never sold anything to your audience, you really don't have the data that you need to make a decision on even what that membership should be. What I recommend is selling them ideally a bunch of different individual start and finish courses, and that will help you learn what your audience wants. Because you might think, this is one of the things that's really hard to grasp, because I might have an idea and I think that's amazing. This is so valuable. People are going to love this. But then I put it out there and people don't love it, or only a few love it, or it's okay, but it's not as earth-shattering as I thought it was going to be. That becomes double. That's difficult just in and of itself. But then if it's an ongoing membership and I put all this work into building and creating it and selling it and nobody buys, now I'm on the hook for those 10 people who signed up and are paying me, $10 a month. When really it only makes sense when I've got several hundred members. You see what I mean? You're having to commit to an eternity of creating this thing, or you shut it down, and that's embarrassing because you have to say, hey, turns out I'm not doing this, not enough people are interested. It would be, you just don't have the data to know whether it's a good idea. So ideally, when you launch your membership, you have a very strong data-driven reasoning behind why this will work. Why? Because you've seen what people like with your free content. Then you've seen what they like with your email content, and you've seen what they buy with their wallets, which is the most important piece. What things have they bought from you from a course standpoint? And then you can interpolate from that what thing would they buy in some sort of an ongoing membership format. Now, that's not to say you can't start with membership and crush it. It's just, to me, it's the way I started was lots of courses before membership, and I've done 2 completely different memberships over the years. One that's been running since 2011, one that ran for about 7 years that I partnered for with someone else. And they've worked well, but I don't think they would have worked well had I not already created several courses and learned from making those courses, A, how to make better content for people who are paying for it, and B, learning what they actually want. So for me, I'm in the audio music niche. I made several courses, and then a couple of years in, I launched my VIP membership. And it started off as a $5 a month membership that just got extra bonus training from me. And $5 a month times even several hundred people just isn't that much money. And so eventually, a few years later, we raised it to $10 a month, and then eventually raised it to $20 a month and added a second tier that is $50 a month. And so that's the current state of it, but it's very different from what it was back in 2011. And we're currently in this model of there's monthly training from me, but there's also a monthly challenge that members do. So I give them a challenge to mix a song, write a song, record a song, do something creative. Here's some tracks to a song, a guitar and a vocal. Take that and produce it out to a full band thing. So they're getting to do the reps of like doing the things that I teach in the real world, and they get real results as a result. And then the upper tier of that membership, they get extra feedback from me, live streams where I critique their work. They get a private podcast just for that group, and there's a few other things. So that has been a long and arduous journey. And it is still probably only about 20% of my overall income. So I enjoy it. I appreciate that 20%, and I love that group of people, and they've taught me so much about how to do this well and what's valuable and what's not valuable. But that membership has not been the thing that's going to skyrocket my success. It's valuable monetarily and in lots of other like intangible ways that help me make a better business altogether. And typically the people that are in my membership are the same people who are going to buy my courses anyway. But the actual revenue from that membership, like I said, is about 20% of my overall revenue. So it's not knocking things out of the park. Now, maybe that will change as we continue to adjust, but that's my guess is that's about what it's going to be. And I'm okay with that. All right, so real quickly, if you are thinking about you're with me, we're going to talk about courses next, and you're thinking, okay, I like what this guy's talking about. I'd like to know kind of bigger picture, what is the overall business model? Because I get like selling stuff is one piece of it, but all the stuff before that, like how do we get people to sell the product too? I explain all of that in a single page diagram of this business model I call the game plan. And I've created a video where I walk you through that model. It's a free masterclass. You can have it for free. Just go to joegilder.biz/game to check that out. Okay, so let's talk about courses. So we've talked about memberships. I think memberships are great. Just put that off for a hot minute and let's focus on courses for a season. For me, when I started my business, I decided to create, the very first thing I sold was a 12-week course on the music production process, start to finish, about an hour a week. So if you know anything about music production, that's enough to like get you started and scratch the surface, but I certainly couldn't go super deep because it's a big involved process. But it was kind of where my head was and as big as I could think at the time, so that's what I did. And then following that, I realized, okay, people bought that, and I tried to sell it again, and fewer people bought it. And I realized, okay, my email list was maybe 500 people at the time. Some of them bought it. I sold, $3,000 worth of it in the first month and another $2,000 the next month. And then it kind of dried up. And so I thought, okay, now what? Well, only thing I knew to do was I thought I made a course and I sold it and they bought it and it made money. So why don't I just do that again? It's such a very basic way of thinking, like caveman simple. I did this, it made money, let me do that again. So I started that next year, creating course after course after course. And so I thought, what's a topic that people ask me about? Let me make a course around that topic. So I made a course around Pro Tools, which was the recording software that I used at the time. And I sold it for $27, $47, something like that. And then I made a course about editing, how to go through and do all the audio editing stuff that you have to do in a music project. I thought that would be really interesting. Turns out it's pretty boring and not many people bought it. Some people bought it, which is, by the way, a big point here. Anything I ever created to sell, I always sold it. It never didn't sell at least a little bit. So just for what it's worth, it may be disappointing. It may not sell well. You may find that it wasn't worth the time and effort based on the number of sales that it made. But I've never had anything just not sell. Maybe that means I priced everything too low. So they were like, why not? It's $27. What do I have to lose? But it always sold. But some things sold way better than others. So a few months later, I was thinking through, I was in this kind of idea of just making these smaller courses that I could really create in a week and just take the different topics that people ask me about that they have trouble with and just dive deep into each of those. So if you're familiar with the music world, there's a process called mixing. So once you record something, you take all those tracks and you have to mix them together. That involves moving the faders up and down volume-wise, but it also involves doing things like EQ and compression. Those are kind of the two main processes that you use. EQ is like bass, treble, mids, but it's more involved, and you do that on individual tracks to make everything blend together and sound nice, because the raw tracks, as good as they might sound, still need to be blended together to sound like a nice final mix that you'd hear on the radio. And then compression is another tool that you use that's even more complicated and hard to understand. And so I would get lots of questions about that, lots of confusion around those. So I made a course called Understanding EQ, and I made a course called Understanding Compression. And I continued, actually, that understanding theme. I made probably a dozen courses understanding blank, a specific kind of niched down topic that people really wanted to know about. You have to know how to use EQ and compression to get good at mixing. So it made sense. So I had a course that just dove real deep into those. I had a couple different versions of them that I renewed over the years. The final version, I think, was kind of a big 4-part training course with an hour training for each section. I actually delivered it via a live webinar, which is wild, but that format worked pretty well. People seemed to like it. It was in-depth enough to cover it, but since I was only dealing with one topic, it didn't have to be a 30-hour course. Something that was 4 to 6 hours covered that topic really well, and then they could take that and apply that to their mixes and see results. So what was happening was in a not completely, but I can't figure out how I'm going to say this. I was solving a specific problem, but not as well as I could have. So I was solving a problem of helping them understand how to do something like EQ. The problem with those was there was no specific thing they could do by the end of the course. They had a better understanding of that tool, and they could apply that to their mixing process, but it wasn't giving them the full picture, if that makes sense. And I learned that by creating all of these individual courses. So fast forward a few years, I'm continually making new courses. That first year, I was probably making a new course every month or two. That slowed down, but I'm constantly making new courses, revisiting and relaunching old courses, learning from their feedback, figuring out what works, what sells. And I realized a few years into it that I had all these kind of niche products about very specific pieces of a bigger picture thing, and people were confused. So at one point, I think I had like 19 courses that you could buy, and they were all most of them were very specific topics. And I realized I didn't really cover, aside from that very first product that I made, I didn't cover the process from start to finish for people. And they would say, hey, where do I start? And I'd say, well, you probably could take this course and this course, watch those, and then combine what you learned there with this course, and that'll help you get pretty close to this thing that you're trying to do. I wasn't giving them a complete transformation. And so that's when I scrapped almost all the courses that I sold, took them off the website, and proceeded to create 3 flagship courses, one on recording, one on mixing, one on mastering. Those are the 3 big phases of the process. And this week I'm launching a songwriting course, which kind of goes before the recording course. And those sold really, really, really well because I could now promise a transformation. I could promise you're going to start here, even if you know nothing about this topic, and by the end, you'll be able to do this. With those little niche products, I couldn't make that promise. So they sold okay, but there was always this like, you're really just buying one piece of the puzzle. It's a good piece, it's a helpful piece, but it's not the whole puzzle. And then if you bought all the courses, they still didn't fit together in a super cohesive way. And so I learned through that process of selling those individual courses and making six figures doing it, I realized it was starting to get complicated, both for me and especially for the customer. And so I scratched all of those, brought out and created these three main courses that it turns out like the mixing course covers those niche courses on how to use EQ, how to use compression, how to do these other things that I made small courses for. But now that I had an overall framework that could take them through the process, teach them all those things they need to know in the appropriate depth, but there really was a start and an end. And I think that's the most important thing with your products. I think if you want to do small niche-based products, I think that can be wonderful market research and make you some money in the meantime. Like I said, I was making six figures selling these individual niche products. I just realized eventually after making a lot of those, I learned a lot and was able to kind of pivot and do an even better job, which I don't think I would have gotten to that point had I not sold those little niche products. So here's a takeaway for you. Think about what is the niche that you're trying to serve. Let's go back to the baking analogy. What is like one of the biggest problems that you can solve? It's a small in relation to the whole thing. You're not going to create a course on how to be a baker, but maybe it is how to make the perfect apple pie. That seems, I'm not in that world, but I imagine I would be really interested in that, or whatever that thing is, how to make the perfect croissant or whatever, and then make that course and sell it. Now, you can say, yeah, but I want to teach them how to do this. You can do all of that, but think about it this way. You can create that one course, you can sell it, you can start to learn the art of creating and selling things to your audience, because you're not going to be good at it at first. You're going to make some sales, but you're going to have lots of room for improvement. So why not make it on smaller scale? Then do a blueberry pie, then do a rhubarb pie, and then maybe you do bundle those three together into your pie course, your pie bundle. You see what I'm saying? Once you have a bunch of different things, you can start to bundle them together. And eventually, let's say 5 years from now, you've done this a number of times, maybe you have a dozen courses. Now you could package those into maybe a membership, or you've learned a lot to now do the ultimate, home baking roadmap, home baking blueprint, where you are going to teach them everything they need to know about baking. You start with simple things like maybe cookies, then you work your way up to the more complicated stuff. I don't know what that is. And that could be kind of a flagship course that you create that replaces those ones you made before, because you learned a lot from those and they serve their purpose, but now you've got your flagship. Now that flagship's going to be an easier sell, and you're probably going to be able to charge more for it. My individual courses that I made, I sold those from $27 to $50 to maybe $100, maybe $150. But then the flagship courses I can easily sell for $200 to $300, and then there's like upsells and like different tiers for even more, because they very clearly go in depth and give you a very clear transformation. That's the big word. If you could get one word that you take away from this video, transformation. How can you give them a transformation? You may think that's not really a transformation to learn how to bake a pie. For that person, it is. They literally went from not knowing how to make a good pie to knowing how to make a good pie. That's transformative. Is it, changing their life? Just like getting married or having a kid would? No, of course not. But it's still transformative. That's still a thing. And you're trying to give them a very specific solution to a specific problem and a transformation. If you can think about those things, you'll probably be able to fill up an entire piece of paper with all kinds of ideas for courses that you could create. Pick the one that seems the most popular, that seems like the one that you think people would like the most based on how they respond to your data, and then make a video about it. Do a YouTube video around that topic and see how that works. Or if you've already done that, you already have that data, and now work towards creating something that's more in depth than you can go in a YouTube video, and gives them maybe 5 to 6 hours of in-depth content around that thing. Package it up and sell it. So you may be thinking, okay, but how do I sell it? What do I use for that? When I started out, I used an email provider, PayPal, and then Dropbox. No, just an FTP server. So when you bought my course, I would send you an email with a link to download a zip file full of a bunch of videos that you could watch. It was super janky. There was no place to log in. I didn't know how to do that. Granted, it was a lot harder back then. But now I use a system called Kajabi, which you've probably heard of. If not, it is fantastic. I've used at least 3, 4, 5 different systems over the years of running my business. Kajabi is by far the best, and it allows you to do everything in one platform. I'm a big fan of all-in-one. Instead of having this service and this service and this service and this service, Kajabi does it all for me. So my website, all my course creation stuff, my email marketing, you can even do podcasting. All of that happens. All the opt-in pages, all of that can happen within Kajabi. So if you want to try out Kajabi, they offer a 14-day free trial. If you use my link, you can actually get a 30-day free trial and really run it through its paces. So if you want to check that out, it's at joegilder.biz/Kajabi. Okay, thanks for sticking around with me to the end of this video. I hope it was really helpful for you. Please subscribe if you want to hear more from me, and here's a video to check out next.